streaming. Thanks to all of you for tuning in, and welcome. We're broadcasting live today from New Jersey. So I'm on the other side. Now I know how some of the others of you feel. And we're here so visiting grandchildren. And so I'm happy to be able, through the courtesy and the miracle of Zoom. It's one of the advantages of Zoom, of course, that you can link up worldwide. So welcome to everybody. I want to wish a refuah shalema to all the people who have COVID out there, who are quarantining. It seems like almost everybody we know, at least somebody, we all know somebody who's in that situation. So we hope that that will soon pass and people will be safe. I want to also dedicate today's shiur to the memory of the two chayalim, the ksinim, who tragically were killed in this episode of what is very strangely called friendly fire. It's a terrible, perhaps one of the most terrible ways in which someone can leave this world. But all of these individuals are tzaddikim. They'll go straight to Olam Haba. Nevertheless, I'm very shaken by this tragic accident that took place just yesterday. So their neshamot should have an aliyah. Today we're talking about Parshat Beshalach. We know about Beshalach. It's one of the most famous parshiot in the Torah. It's the only parsha that a section of which is read every single day as we read Az Yashir, which is the highlight, although we're going to talk about a slightly different subject, but we're all familiar, of course, with the Shira, and it's something which is obviously very, very stimulating and inspirational. This final moment when we are freed from Egypt's clutches with the destruction of the Egyptian army. We're going to talk today about the subject of Emuna, faith. And I think, considering this tragedy that we experienced in Israel, you always need Emuna, and you have to have a double dose of it when you're facing such terrible circumstances. So we want to explore a bit the subject of Emuna, which I suggest to you is really the centerpiece of this week's Parsha. So we begin right at the very beginning. It's a good place to begin. And immediately in this first section of Beshalach, prior to the splitting of the sea, so we're told by Yasev Elokim et ha'am derech hamidbar Yam Suf, that God turns around the Jewish people as we are traveling from Egypt on our way to Israel. We are suddenly turned around. This interesting word, vayasev, and it's complemented right away by this next phrase and the explanation of how we're being turned around, vayashuvu, that Israel is returned, in a sense, in a different direction. So these two words together, vayasev and vayashuvu, come to tell us an interesting circumstance. When we left Egypt, finally freed, suddenly Hashem decides to turn us around, and almost inexplicably, we return towards Egypt. And Vayashuvu b'nei Israel, we retreat in the opposite direction, turn ourselves around, or we are turned around, and we go back towards Mitzrayim. What's the purpose of this? Well, Rashi and others comment that it was in order to entice Paro to chase after us. Why did we want Paro to chase after us? Well, that actually relates to the title of this week's Parsha, Beshalach. The pasuk says, "Vahi b'shalach Paro et ha'am." It was when Paro sent out the nation. And some of the commentators see this as God overhearing the Jewish people speaking and giving credit to Paro. It was when Paro freed the Jewish people. Excuse me, says God. Who freed you? Paro? I'm not the one who did all these plagues and brought you out. Maybe you need another lesson in who's really running the show. So the people turn around. Paro's emissaries, some say this was Datan and Aviram and other members of the Erev Rav that were traveling with us, who came back and told Paro, hey, the Jews are returning. Why are they returning? Because they've reached a place called Baal Zephon, the idol of the north. And at this point, Paro says to himself, I have an idol stationed in the extremities and the borders of Egypt, and this is my northern idol. They've reached it. They somehow can't cross because the idol has power. And that tells me that maybe God is not omnipotent, all-powerful. And Paro starts to regret his having let Bnei Israel out of Egypt. He's under pressure by his people as well. Although they said to Paro, just get rid of the Jews. They're causing, all these problems. The economy is crumbling and 10 plagues. Now they say, you know what? We're losing a very, very valuable source of labor, free labor, and let's go after them. That's one explanation. There is another explanation, however, and that relates to our topic of Emuna, that maybe this isn't done so much for Paro to chase after us and allow God to give him the coup de grace and finish him off and show once and for all who's really in power, not Paro, but God. But maybe it's done in order to test the Emuna, the faith of the Jewish people. Because without setbacks and without having sometimes to retreat, you never really know if you have true Emuna. When everything goes smoothly and you just continue on your merry way, it's very easy to believe. What happens when you face trouble? When a marriage ends in divorce, when children are sick, when your business fails, that's when we judge whether we have emunah, when times are tough. And to some extent, I suggest that's what's happening here. Bnei Israel is being tested. We're always being tested. Do we really have emunah? Not only in the good times, but more importantly in the tough times. And so the pasuk says, and none of this is coincidental. Perek Yudalid, God says to Moshe, Daber el bnei Israel v'yashuvu v'yachanu lifnei pi hachirot lifnei Baal Zephon, between two places, pi hachirot, the mouth of freedom, and Baal Zephon, the idol of the north. I suggest that this is a metaphor. This is where we're standing between freedom, which comes when we believe and we accept God and follow him, or Baal Zephon, the idol of the north. We are between those two poles. Which one are we going to choose? Freedom, which means we accept God's assurance over us, his guidance, his promise, or are we going to turn back towards Baal Zephon? And we have to make that choice, and it's not a simple one. So we are waiting there in a sense of limbo, as you might say, between the Paro and the deep reed sea. It's not so deep, deep enough. And we're not sure what to do. And to some extent, Moshe feels the same way. So they have this discussion. Vayomer Moshe el ha'am, this is the 13th pasuk in the 14th chapter. He says to the nation, Al tiru, people, don't worry. Hit yatzvu, just stay where you are, uru'et yeshuat Hashem, and see the salvation of God. Asher yaseh lechem hayom. See what God is going to do for us today. Ki asher ra'item et Mitzrayim hayom lo tosifu lirotam ad olam. The Egypt you see today, you'll never see again. And then he makes the statement, Hashem yilachem lachem v'atem tacharishun. God will fight for you, and you will be silent. And, well, this is Moshe's advice. Is Moshe ever wrong? Rarely. But in this case, God corrects him. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, ma titzak elai. God says, why are you crying out to me? That's not what we need right now. Daber el bnei Israel v'yisau. What we need is for the people of Israel to move forward. don't complain, don't worry. I gave you a commandment, follow it, move, go. That's when everything happens. And we know the story of Nachshon. He's going to jump into the water. It won't split until somebody shows Emuna. Nachshon from the tribe of Yehuda, which is always known for its bravery, for its courage and willingness to jump right in. This is exactly what happens. Nachshon jumps in, say Chazal, and that's the moment when the sea splits because he believes that's what God told him to do. Well, the battle still isn't over. There is still this struggle for Emunah. The pasuk says after God promises what will happen as we cross the Reed Sea, the Yam Suf, and then says, V'yadu Mitzrayim ki ani Hashem. The Egyptians will know, or Egypt will know, that I am God. It's a very pointed phrase. Egypt will know. But why doesn't he say, everyone will know? And certainly it seems to suggest Egypt will know, but the Jews are harder to convince. We are a very difficult people. And it takes a lot to really convince us. So although Egypt will be convinced, maybe it's going to take something else and something more for Am Yisrael to be convinced. And only after we see what happens and we actually witness, and that's why in Az Yashir, we say that the people actually went to see that the Egyptians were at the bottom of the sea, in a sense. Of course, the sea had parted. Only when we saw that did we finally say, yes, we believe. But when we witnessed the entire event, only then were we able to finally proclaim, yes, God exists, God is real, God made a promise, he keeps the promise. Vayar Yisrael et Mitzrayim meit al sfat hayam. We saw them dead, and then and only then, Vayar Yisrael et hayad hagdolah. Then we saw God's hand. We didn't see that hand through the Eser Makot. We didn't see that hand through all the many miracles that took place. We had to actually see the evidence, what we call habeas corpus, show us the body. And then we believed and said, Vayaminu b'Hashem u'v'Moshe abdo. We believed in Hashem and Moshe, his servant. We'll come back to this in a moment. We then come to a place called Mara. It's also a very mysterious kind of encounter. We come to this place, just as an example that this Emuna is far from complete. We start our complaining. And even though we have seen these miracles, we start to protest. We say to Moshe, Vayomer Aleichem B'nai Yisrael, Mi yitain mutenu b'yad Hashem be'eretz Mitzrayim. If only we had died in Egypt. Why did we have to come here? We have nothing to drink. We have nothing to eat. The water is not potable. We can't drink it. And so what happens? It's in this mysterious idea that Moshe is told, throw a tree into the water and somehow it will be drinkable. This is what happens at Mara. And the Chazal tell us, the commentaries tell us that when a tree and water are always used as a synonym or a symbol of the Torah. Ki eitz chaim hi. So we're told that we were given 3 mitzvot. And somehow those mitzvot were going to restore our emunah. Remember, this is before Matan Torah. We really don't have any commandments until then. According to one source, we did have a semi practice of Shabbat, because Moshe had told Paro, give them a day off. So the day off he chose was Shabbat. But we didn't have any real technical mitzvot. But now we're given 3 mitzvot. And the primary one among them, among the 3, It is the para aduma, which is the most inexplicable and mysterious of all the commandments of the Torah. This is the one mitzvah which even the greatest minds, Moshe Rabbeinu, Shlomo HaMelech, don't really fully understand what is going on here, that you prepare this kind of magic potion that is able to make those who have become tamei through contact with the dead, now make them pure. At the same time, the Kohen who administers it, who is pure, becomes impure, etc. Metame tahorim, metaher tameim, as we say. But this is what they're given. We can ask the question, how does this somehow restore faith? The answer to that is very deep and profound, that it is really the mitzvot that we don't understand. Those are the ones that really test and ultimately strengthen our faith. To believe in something which is not logical, to believe in a mitzvah of do not murder, or to believe in a mitzvah that is self-evident. Okay, it comes from Hashem and it has its power from Hashem, but it's different than something which we don't understand at all. For example, the laws of kashrut. We don't really understand those laws. Why can we eat certain food from certain animals or birds or fish, and some we can't? We have all kinds of fancy explanations, but we really don't know. But this is, I would suggest, the whole idea behind it. You are using this as a way of expressing Emuna. I'm not doing it because it's self-evident. I'm not doing it because everybody else in the world does it. I'm doing it because Hashem said to do it, and I have faith in God. He tells me to do it, must be right. And that's what Paraduma is about. The truth is Paraduma, and this relates to our dedication for today. Paraduma is really about the mystery of death. And if anything questions our Emuna or threatens our Emuna, it's when we think about death. Why does God bring death to the world? Why do these events happen where people die? That really is a struggle to maintain your emunah when you face death. But that's exactly what gave the people strength. They were given this mitzvah at Mara. The word Mara means bitter. It tends, to apply to the water that was bitter, but it was saying we had a certain bitterness too. We still had to have faith. We've been through a lot, more than 100 years of slavery. And it wasn't so simple to turn that around, even with all the plagues and all the miracles. 100 years, it puts something into your system that says, maybe tomorrow we'll go back to being slaves again. So you need something to strengthen you. And these kinds of mitzvot that are based on faith-based commandments, that's something that ultimately trains us to have emunah. And then comes the story of the man. The man is really a phenomenal miracle. It's here in the same Parsha as Kriyat Yamsuf. And there are many of the commentators who say, when asked what is the greatest miracle God ever performed, if like you're on Family Feud, the majority of the audience says, splitting of the Red Sea. Says Chazal, no, it's really the man. This miraculous food that by tradition tasted like whatever you wanted it to taste like, this man that fell every day for 40 years, so we didn't have to grow the food or cultivate the food, that's the greatest mitzvah. The only problem is it happened every day. And when a miracle happens every day, then you dismiss it and you think, oh, that's no miracle. Ultimately, when the man will stop falling and the people will have to actually go into Israel and cultivate the land, they will appreciate, wow, what a miracle we had. And many of the Mefarshim tell us that the man really outranks any of the other mitzvot because it had so many miraculous qualities. We'll mention a couple in a moment. But the man is a strange element. We really aren't sure exactly what it was. There is a description of it, that it's a kind of wafer that honey-coated. We're really not too sure. The people call it man because they say, manhu, what is it? It falls out of the sky every day except for Shabbat. And, it's manna from heaven, literally. Rashi says something very interesting on this expression manhu, hachanat mazonhu, that it's not so much food, but it's the preparation or base of food. Very interesting comment. And you've heard me say this before, but the secret to what man is right in the pasuk, because the pasuk says, "Eit asher tofu efu." The word tofu tells us exactly what Rashi's saying. It's a base. It's tofu. You want to make it into hamburger? Have a hamburger. You want to make it into tofu ice cream? Have tofu ice cream. It's the Torah, I think, is giving us, they didn't understand this for a few thousand years, but we who live today, we understand what it means. Eit asher tofu efu, as it's hard to even translate. Bake what you want to bake is the translation here. So it's perfect for tofu. You can quote me on that. In any case, the mun is only going to last one day. After one day, it disappears. It becomes rotten. You can't save it for the next day. If you try to save it, the only day you can do that is Friday. You can save it. You get what's called lechem mishneh. You can get a double portion. That's why we have 2 chalot when we make a motzi on Friday night and Shabbat and Chag, because it fell as a double portion, and it lasted then until Sunday morning. Otherwise, it was gone the next day. Why? Because it's testing us. Will we believe, today I have man, I'll have it tomorrow too? Or will I say, no, I have to save it up because yes, God gave it to me today, but maybe tomorrow I won't have anything. You're supposed to believe. When Hashem says, you're going to be getting that every day, don't have to stockpile it. I've promised that you'll have it. Now the question is, will you have Emuna? And of course, this is particularly true about Shabbat. And you know the whole story with the people are told, you collect the double portion, but don't go collecting it on Shabbat. And this is another indication that this is one of the mitzvot we were given. We were told, stay in the camp. Don't go out of the camp on Shabbat. Don't go past the tchum, the legal limit of how far you can go. And then, whether it's Datan and Aviram or some other people from the Eruv Rav, they sprinkled some of their mun in the field to make it look like it was falling on Shabbat. And God did not tell the truth when he said it wouldn't. And then the birds came and ate it. So we want to reward the birds because they did a good thing, etc. You know that whole story, I'm sure. But the mun is a testing ground. Another of the interesting things about the mun that was miraculous, it fell on the people's doorsteps or in proximity to the people's tents in direct relation to their level of righteousness. If you were truly righteous, the mun fell right at your door like the morning paper. You opened up the door, you took the mun along with your copy of whatever your daily paper is. If you weren't so righteous, maybe it fell a few feet away, a few, distance from your door. And if you really weren't at all righteous, then you had to do some walking to get it. So the mun was a kind of cosmic, indicator of just who is righteous and who isn't, without getting into a discussion of what makes somebody righteous. But the whole concept, of course, is that man is there to test your faith. There are many people that back in the day when Jews weren't treated very well, even in westernized countries, there were people who would go to work, they'd get a job, no problem on Monday, but comes Friday, and now it's time to leave in time to get back in time for Shabbat and not to show up for work on Saturday if work was there. They come back on Sunday or Monday, they're told you're fired. And they would have to start job after job after job till they found one that would allow them to keep Shabbat. That was faith. Am I going to have Parnasa if I choose to keep Shabbat? Or am I going to have to somehow, be Mechalel Shabbat in order to make a living? These were tremendous tests of faith to many of our grandparents or great-grandparents when America, for example, was not all that Shabbat friendly and let people practice their religion as freely as they wanted to. So all of this is really brought home through this metaphor of the mun. And of course, now you see that mun is the root word of Emuna. Mun is really the thing which tests our Emuna. So when you ask manhu, what is it? It is the faith tester. It is the thing that's going to let us gauge for ourselves what is our level of Emunah. A similar message is also coming out of the last section of our Parsha, the battle with Amalek. This is our encounter with our archenemy Amalek, who always tests our faith. And here you see it very, very graphically and dramatically. So what happens? First of all, when we are unsure of our faith in God, and we say, Va'al nasotem et Hashem lemor, we test God, and we ask, Hayesh Hashem b'kirbeinu im ayin, is God among us or not? Because we're still not sure. At that moment, Vayavo Amalek, that's the point of entry. That's the opportunity for Amalek to take advantage of our doubt and perhaps lack of faith, and they attack us. Moshe says to Yoshua, pick soldiers, go out there and go to war, because again, part of our God's mindset in terms of what we are supposed to do in this world is we're supposed to do what comes naturally, fight for our survival and not only depend on miracles. And so Moshe and Yoshua, they choose an army and they go to fight with Amalek. And in this famous image, Moshe and Aaron and Hur, they stand on top of the mountain. And Kasher Yarim Moshe Yado B'Gabar Yisrael, when Moshe lifts his arms up, Israel prevails. When Moshe's arms fall, Gavar Amalek, Amalek prevails. I mean, is this, what's going on here? Is this some kind of a magical, magic that he raises his arms? And they have to, Moshe, his arms are heavy, so they sit him down, and Aaron and Hur hold up his hands. And then, Vayihi Adav Emuna ad Bo Hashamesh. What a strange phrase. Moshe's arms were faithful until the sun comes. So the idea here, as we can now maybe understand after this discussion, is that it's not magic. Moshe was motioning to the people, if you have faith in God, he's pointing his hands to the sky, you'll prevail, you'll win. If you don't, when his hands are lowered and you're not looking skyward and you're not understanding and believing that your help comes from heaven, then you won't win. Vayihi Adav Emunah. His hands were signaling faith, Emunah. And that's how we were able to defeat Amalek. And that is the same theme that comes through all of this Parsha. I mentioned in the title, mun and money. It's maybe not a coincidence that money sounds like money. It's very much like mun, right? Because just like the mun would only last for one day, it comes and it goes. The same is true about wealth and about money. And Chazal say that's one of the reasons why coins are shaped as they are. They roll. You can roll. You've seen that when you drop a coin, it will roll. So the idea is that money can roll between one and another. Sometimes you have it. Sometimes it goes to someone else. Hashem can make money appear and disappear. You have to have faith. that your parnasa comes from Hashem, he'll provide for you. You can stockpile all the money in the world, and then who knows, some event can happen. We've seen this in history with people who are multi-millionaires, even billionaires, and in almost an instant, they can lose their wealth. And somebody else who had no expectation of being wealthy, somehow they manage to, with faith in God, they do all right. And some of them become very, very wealthy themselves. So man and money, it's, I think, tied together, this whole idea of having faith that God will provide your parnasa, and don't expect that you are the one who are going to control that. You control that by having Emuna. And that's why all the people who say, find it very interesting when one of the reasons or excuses that people give for not coming to Israel is because, how will I have a parnasa there? So I say to them, I thought you were a God-fearing person, a religious person, because we don't believe that we are in total control of who's wealthy and who isn't. That comes from Hashem. He controls the parnasa. You say to him, I will do my share. I will do my hishtadlut. I will work. But Hashem, it's up to you to provide the parnasa. And you promised I'll have it. And nobody starves in Israel. Doesn't mean that everybody becomes wealthy, although if you look at the cars on the road, it seems like everybody has a new car. But be that as it may, and everybody has a video, and everybody a TV, and you name it. But that comes from Hashem. Let me conclude with this most dramatic phrase that we use in the Parsha that we said before, Vayaminu b'Hashem u'v'Moshe avdo, that we believed in Hashem and Moshe, his servant. And there is this fantastic phrase that says, I never would have seen it had I not believed it. Now you've heard it the other way. I wouldn't believe it if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. But the opposite is true. I never would have seen it had I not believed it. That means that there are things that you don't recognize unless you have a faith-based mentality, that if you believe it, then you suddenly see, and that's what happened with the people. When they developed the sense of Emuna, they suddenly realized, look at everything Hashem is doing for us. This is exactly what he promised he would do. And it's my faith that allows me actually to see the truth, and maybe not the opposite. And that's why to conclude with this final battle against Amalek, which is really a battle against doubt. We say Amalek in Gematria equals Safek, doubt. You can do the math on that. The idea of instilling this idea, is there a God? And the antidote to doubt or to Amalek is Emuna, is faith. We believe, even if it's something that, again, it comes from inside us, it's not necessarily something you can prove. It's like those mitzvot that you really don't understand why you're doing it, but you come to a level of belief, and then nobody can talk you out of that. It doesn't have to be logical. It's based on belief, and either you have it or you don't. So Moshe says to the people that this battle against Amalek, we did not conclusively win it. We did not wipe out Amalek. We weakened them, but Moshe says, "Vayihi adav emuna ad bo hashamesh." We'll be fighting this battle until ad bo hashamesh literally means, right, until sunset. But figuratively, it means we're fighting this battle until the sun, which is a metaphor, Moshiach, a new day dawning, until Moshiach comes, ad bo hashamesh. And then we will finally look back, and the Emunah, the faith we had in God, will be justified. If it isn't already, we'll see everything in a different light, in the light of the sun, and we'll understand that everything that happens in the world is happening in keeping with God's plan and in keeping with his promises. And then our Emunah will be truly, completely, and finally justified by Yaminu B'Hashem Moshe Avdo. So thank you all for tuning in. if you have a comment or something you want to say very briefly, you can. We will, as I mentioned in the sending out the note, as plan goes, we will not meet next week. We'll not be able to have the shiur. And again, a reminder that all the shiurim are on the BKOA YouTube. If you can't find it, you can send me a WhatsApp and I will send you back the link to everybody, to all these shiurim that you can find from already going back the last 2-3 years that we started to do this year. So if anybody has a question or comment, you can unmute yourself and ask. If not, then I will wish all of you a wonderful Shabbat. Stay healthy, and Shenishma B'sorot Tovot. We should only hear good news.
Thank you.
Shabbat shalom.
Thank you.
Shabbat shalom. Thank you.
Thank you. Shabbat shalom.
Thank you.
Have faith.
Shalom. Thank you very much.
And as we used to say, keep the faith, but don't only keep it, share it with others. And you've got to maintain faith, especially in hard times.